How about we uncover some ancient lost secrets? Let's talk about some of the primary things, some irreducible principles that are common to not only the ancient Egyptians, but to the ancient Greeks and the ancient Indians. So what would those be, and what are we talking about? Let's talk about one term. Now, most people know this English term and its roots from the ancient Greeks, agnosis. Okay? Ignorance. Let's break that word down and let's try to understand how this is a primary principle both of the Indians, the ancient Egyptians, and also is the explicative, denotative principle, the common denominator of a type of metaphysics or theurgy that's common to the Egyptians, the earliest Platonists and Pythagoreans, and the earliest Indians. I'm not talking about the Rig Veda, the Samaveda, and the Athura Veda, but original monistic Advaita Vedanta, original Greek, ancient Pythagorean monism, Indian monism, Egyptian monism. Okay, so now the problem that we have in English is that a lot of our terms are taken from many other languages, and we don't have any roots as far as what they actually mean, how everything is actually connected. So let's just take one principle, okay? And this is applicable to obviously the most important terms in the ancient Egyptian language, in the ancient Greek language, and in the ancient Indian language, both in Prakrit, which I translate Prakrit, I translate Romanized Sanskrit, and I translate ancient Greek, and that would be the principles of ignorance and wisdom. But the term doesn't actually translate as ignorance. Now, in the ancient Prakrit, the term is avidya, or in Sanskrit it would be avidya, agnosis. What about the ancient Egyptians? Let me actually hold up something here so you can see it on my old chalkboard here. Rech and Nech. Here we have the eye taking a look at the sun as a principle of wisdom, and Inrech, outstretched arms over top of Rech. So we have Rech and Inrech. Within this, in the principles of the ancient Greeks, we have the only correct understanding of what these terms mean, such words as tolma, the ancient Greek term, anankye, and euristos dias, the principle of attribution. In other words, the attributional side of a supreme principle. Why is this important? Well, as far as making you money or, forwarding your life in some sort of principle, this isn't important. But those that are interested in these ancient secrets, then you have to know this. Otherwise, you're never going to understand the principles of emanationistic monism of the ancient Greeks, Egyptians, and Indians without knowing these principles. Let's take a look at the term avidya, okay? Now, this is translated always as nescience or ignorance, but that's actually not what the term means. The term literally means the attributional side of light, i.e. wisdom. It's the self that seeks itself. Wisdom seeks wisdom. Now, what are the principles that are common to the ancient Egyptians, Greeks, and Indians as far as this term is concerned? They are all irreducibly one and the same thing, in that they do not differentiate principle from attribute. Let's take another principle, and this is what they used, especially the Egyptians. Rech is denotated with the hieroglyphs of the eye and the sun. In other words, it's actually assimilating the light of the sun, whereas Inrech is outstretched arms. It's literally the principle of illumination or stretching out. Now, from the standpoint of the metaphysics of monistic emanationism, the outstretching of light, which of course cannot be differentiated from illumination, is still a point whereby which we're able to circumvent the principle from the Latin of prima causa, or what in basic, common creationistic parlance would be called original sin. There is no prima causa of the metaphysics, the metaphysical monism of the ancient Egyptians, the Pythagoreans, the Platonists, the Neoplatonists, and the Advaita Vedantists, the early Indus Valley monists of India. The principle is that it is impossible to differentiate principle from attribute. Ironically so, we have no differentiation in English between mind and consciousness. They they basically mean the same thing. You know, the mushy, squishy thing that exists between the human's ears, the brain. We think, well, that's the mind or consciousness. But the ancient Egyptians and the Greeks and the Indians differentiated this out very, very distinctly. And ironically enough, and I translate ancient Prakrit, the word for consciousness, or vijnana, in the ancient Prakrit, which predates Sanskrit, by the way, literally means vi and yana, or the same thing in the ancient Greek, or agnosis. Literally, the word for consciousness means ignorance. But not ignorance in the conventional sense, but ignorance in the absolutist sense of illumination, of the extension, of an identification phenomenology that defines monism. So we have avidya and vijnana, agnosis, and from the ancient Egyptians we have rech and inrech. We have wisdom and inrech, which would be ignorance. But this is not a correct translation, but there's nothing else that I can give you in English that'll correctly define this term. To say that inrech or avidya or agnosis or vinya means ignorance is as stupid as saying that illumination is something completely autonomous and inverse to light. We can't say that illumination is the inverse of light. Literally, the point that you're missing, and which is hard to explain to people because sometimes a lot of the most simple things are impossible to describe to make people to understand it, but the term avidya and vidya, vijnana, rech and inrech, gnosis and agnosis only refers to one thing: principle and attribution of that principle. Do we make a differentiation between light in principle and what light does as an attribute, i.e. illumination? We don't make a distinction. The nature of light is that it sheds forth illumination. We have in one case the principle, the light, and in the other case the attribute, illumination. But they're both one and the same thing. They're irreducible. This is the ancient Greek euristos dias. This is the ancient Greek ananke. This is the ancient Greek tolma. Now the reason that there have been no correct English translations of these ancient Greek terms, tolma, ananke, is oftentimes translated as necessity, but that doesn't mean a damn thing. It doesn't convey meaning. Tolma, ananke, euristos dias, is that they are untranslatable without having a firm grasp of monistic Greek, Platonic, metaphysical, dialectic thought. You know, without having a common cipher, a grounds by which to comprehend what is being said, such that it actually translates into the mind of understanding, a mere translation does not do it. There are many, many Greek words and many, many Prakrit words, lots actually, that are absolutely untranslatable. You will do nobody any damn justice by translating them because they are untranslatable by their very nature. So we have to think in terms now of the word for ignorance and wisdom as directly relational to the principle of light and illumination. Literally, the word for wisdom and light in ancient Greek, in ancient Egyptian, in ancient Prakrit, in ancient Sanskrit is the same word for gnosis. Gnosis and light. Well, we kind of know that, right? But the principle of ignorance, vidya and avidya, jnana and vijnana, gnosis and agnosis, rech and inrech. We have the principle of what we incorrectly translate as ignorance, or the prima causa of monistic monism, which is completely 180 degrees away from both atheism and creationism, okay? The opposite of both of those. Now, here in the modern world, we live with two antinomies. Well, on one hand, we have creationism. On the other hand, we have a bunch of atheists. Well, what if we were to travel back 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 years and arrive at the conclusion that some of the wisest minds who ever lived thought, believed, postulated, put forth, the greatest minds who ever lived, that there was something completely opposite to both nihil ex nihilo, i.e. atheism, which is specifically metaphysical atheism, and completely opposite to creationism. What if there was something that was the opposite of both? Well, you've only got one coin here. On the one hand, you got atheists, that believe that all complexity in the universe is just the result of an accident or a cosmic fart. And on the other side of the coin, you have creationists. Now, from the principle of the ancient Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Indians, the original Indus Valley Indians, the folks that were actually writing many of the stuff on the pillars of King Ashok, and the writings of Sri Sakaracharya, the Vivachudamuni, Upadisahasri, of Advaita Vedanta, there was something completely opposite to those two sides of one coin. We have to understand that there is no prima causa from the principles of these metaphysical standpoints of the Platonists, the Advaita Vedantists, and the ancient Egyptians. From their standpoint, there is no prima causa, there is no original sin, and original attribute has no cause. It is consubstantially the attributional side of the first principle. Light and illumination. Are you going to separate light from illumination? It's absolutely damn impossible. The notion that ignorance is one thing and wisdom is another, well, I mean, that's just a translation. A translation doesn't confer understanding. It doesn't confer comprehension. The ancient terms for wisdom and ignorance, and these are really bad translations because it doesn't convey meaning, are literally the exact same words for light and illumination. From the metaphysical, dialectical standpoint of comprehending ancient monism, illumination and ignorance are one and the same thing. Attributional extension. It is even in the ancient Egyptian iconography for agnosis, or illumination, or ignorance. Inrech. Literally the extension of the arms combined with rech. So we have rech and inrech. It doesn't get much more simple than that, does it? Only takes a little bit of wisdom to actually decipher ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics. Or maybe it takes a lot. Depends on what your standpoint is, right? So we have to understand that there's not a single principle in the universe, even an absolute principle, that does not have one attribute. What the good is in principle is what the good does in attribute. What light is in principle is what light is in attribution. Light and illumination, vidya avidya, gnosis agnosis, jnana and vijnana, rech and inrech. Upon comprehension of the monistic mechanics, the dialectic of ancient Indian, Greek, Egyptian monism, we are then able to fully comprehend and actually translate what are currently still untranslated terms from the ancient Greek. Words like tolma, ananke, and euristos dias, and other terms. We are able to comprehend their meaning, their context, their usage, and we are able to comprehend what the hell they were saying thousands of years ago, because nobody today does. And you can't without knowing these facts. Thanks for watching. Okay?